Welcome to Midnight Terrors, where spine-chilling tales come to life. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications. You don't want to miss a single story that'll keep you up at night. We're on a mission to grow, and your support is everything. Share these terrifying stories with your friends, family, and anyone who dares to listen. Thanks for being part of the journey. Let's begin. It started innocently enough. Lisa had just moved into her grandmother's old Victorian house after inheriting it. The house was a creaking, moody relic filled with antique furniture, dusty chandeliers, and heavy drapes that blocked out much of the sunlight. Among the many peculiar items was a tall, ornate mirror in the hallway, framed in blackened silver, with intricate carvings of twisting vines and unrecognizable creatures. Something about it felt off, but Lisa brushed it aside. After all, it was just a mirror, or so she thought. On her first night, Lisa noticed something odd. She passed the mirror on her way to bed and caught a glimpse of herself. But as she moved, her reflection lingered for just a split second too long. She stopped and stared into the mirror, tilting her head. The reflection followed perfectly, almost mocking her suspicion. With a nervous laugh, she shook it off as fatigue. But over the next few days, the occurrences grew stranger. When she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, she could swear her reflection smirked when she didn't. Once, she leaned in to inspect a blemish on her cheek, only to see her reflection blink even though she hadn't. The unease settled deep in her chest, but she convinced herself it was just her imagination. Lisa's best friend Mia came over to visit. Over coffee, Lisa mentioned the strange behavior of the mirror, trying to laugh it off. Mia, however, didn't laugh. Her face turned serious. "You need to get rid of that thing," Mia said. "There's an old superstition about mirrors like that. They're called soul traps. People believe they could capture a part of you, or let something else out." Lisa rolled her eyes. "It's just an old mirror, Mia." "Just be careful," Mia insisted, staring uneasily at the hallway where the mirror stood. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, expecting the familiar comfort of your reflection, but instead, you see something else, something darker, twisted, and alive. How would you react? Would you scream, run, or stand frozen in disbelief? The realization that the reflection has a will of its own, separate from yours, is enough to shatter your perception of reality. The mirror no longer serves as a harmless object. It becomes a predator, a portal to something otherworldly. That night, Lisa lay in bed, her friend's warning echoing in her mind. She couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, suffocating. The house creaked as though it were alive. At some point, she decided to confront her fears. She slipped out of bed and padded down the hall to the mirror. It was dark, but the moonlight streaming through the windows gave the mirror an eerie glow. She stood in front of it, staring at her reflection. She tilted her head to the right. The reflection followed. She smiled faintly. It smiled back. But as she turned to walk away, her reflection didn't move. It stayed, staring at her with cold, unblinking eyes. Lisa froze, the hair on her neck standing on end. "What the hell?" she whispered, turning back slowly. Her reflection was grinning now, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across its face. Then it moved, without her. It pressed its hands against the inside of the glass, its eyes locked onto hers. "Let me out," it whispered, though its lips didn't move. Lisa stumbled backward, heart pounding, and fled to her room, slamming the door shut. She spent the rest of the night under her blankets, trembling, unable to sleep. The next morning, Lisa woke up with a pounding heart, the unsettling events of the night still fresh in her mind. Determined to banish the mirror and the dread it brought, she grabbed an old bedsheet from the closet and cautiously approached the looming antique. Her hands trembled as she threw the sheet over its surface, refusing to meet her reflection. Even though it was covered, she could swear she felt its oppressive presence, like a pair of unseen eyes watching her every move. She wasted no time and dialed the number of a local antique dealer she found online, explaining that she wanted the mirror gone, immediately. By midday, an older man arrived, his face lined with years of experience and an air of quiet authority. He stepped into the house and froze the moment his gaze landed on the covered mirror. Lisa noticed his sudden change in demeanor. "It's just an antique mirror," she said, trying to mask her unease. "I need it out of here." The man shook his head slowly. his expression darkening as he approached the shrouded object. He hesitated, as though weighing the decision to proceed. Finally, he reached out but stopped short of touching the sheet. "This mirror," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "It has a dark energy. Something unnatural surrounds it." Lisa's stomach churned. "What do you mean by dark energy? Can't you just take it away?" The dealer stepped back, almost stumbling as if repelled by an invisible force. His unease grew into fear as he glanced around the room, his eyes darting to the corners as though expecting something or someone to emerge. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head again. "I won't touch it. I'd advise you to destroy it, but even that might not be enough." Lisa's heart sank. "What do you mean, not enough? What happens if I don't?" The man stared at her with a grim expression. "Mirrors like this, they're gateways. To what? I can't say for certain. But I've seen things I don't care to speak of. Whatever you do, don't let it stay in your home another night. The longer it stays, the harder it will be to get rid of." Before Lisa could ask any more questions, the dealer turned abruptly and headed for the door. As he reached the threshold, he paused and looked over his shoulder, his face pale and grave. "Be careful, miss. Sometimes, destroying an object like these only angers what's attached to it." And with that, he left, leaving Lisa alone with the mirror and a growing sense of dread. When faced with something so sinister, the logical solution is to get rid of it, smash it, burn it, throw it away. But what if these actions didn't free you? What if they only provoked the malevolent force trapped within? Lisa was desperate. She couldn't live another moment under the mirror's sinister gaze. Fueled by fear and frustration, she grabbed the heaviest hammer she could find in the garage, her hands slick with sweat as she gripped, heart-pounding. She stood before the shrouded mirror, whispering a silent prayer. She yanked off the bedsheet, revealing the glass beneath, its surface smooth and polished, too perfect, almost alive. Without hesitation, she raised the hammer high and brought it down with all her strength. The moment the hammer struck the mirror, an ear-splitting scream ripped through the air, louder than anything she'd ever heard. It wasn't just a sound, it was a wail of anguish and fury, as if something ancient and malevolent had been awakened. The hammer rebounded violently, flying from her hand and clattering to the floor as though it had struck an unyielding wall of steel. Lisa stumbled backward, clutching her ears, her breath shallow and erratic. The mirror remained intact, not a single crack marring its surface. But something was different, something terrible. Her reflection was no longer her own. The image in the glass twisted, its features contorting with rage. Her face, no, the thing's face, stared back at her with glowing, venomous eyes, its mouth curling into a wicked grin that didn't belong to her. It mouthed words she couldn't hear but instinctively understood. "You can't get rid of me." Terror clawed at her throat as she fled the room, slamming the door behind her. But that night, the mirror made its presence known, refusing to be ignored. The torment began with whispers, soft at first, like the murmurs of a distant conversation. But they grew louder, more insistent, until they filled every corner of the house, echoing through the walls. The whispers seemed to follow her, growing deafening as she approached the hallway where the mirror hung. Lisa tried to block out the noise, stuffing her ears with cotton, but it was no use. The whispers weren't just in the air, they were inside her head. And then came the shadows. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, a trick of the dim lighting or her own paranoia. But no, the shadows had a will of their own, shifting and crawling across the walls, their shapes grotesque and unnatural. She swore she saw hands stretching out, clawing toward her before dissolving into the darkness. The worst, however, was her reflection. It no longer stayed confined to the mirror. She began to see it everywhere, in the gleam of the windows, the black void of her phone screen, even in the rippling surface of the water in her glass. No matter where she looked, it was there, always watching her. Its eyes burned with malice, its expression growing darker, more menacing each time. When she closed her eyes, she thought she'd escape it, but even then, it found her. The reflection's face loomed in her mind, whispering to her in a voice that wasn't hers. "You brought me here. You can't make me leave." By midnight, the house had become a living nightmare. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning, and the mirror, though out of sight, felt alive, pulsing with a dark energy that filled the air with a suffocating weight. Lisa realized with horrifying clarity, she wasn't just being haunted. She was being hunted. Lisa knew she couldn't live like this. She dug through her grandmother's old belongings, hoping to find some clue about the mirror. In a dusty journal, she found an entry describing the mirror as a family heirloom, passed down for generations. It warned never to break it, as it would release the trapped soul within. The journal hinted at a ritual to bind the entity back into the mirror, but it required a personal sacrifice, a drop of her own blood and the recitation of an ancient incantation. With no other options, Lisa prepared for the ritual. At midnight, she stood before the mirror, a knife in one hand and the journal in the other. Her reflection stared back, grinning wickedly. As she pricked her finger and let a drop of blood fall onto the glass, the reflection's grin faded. It began to pound against the inside of the mirror, screaming in fury. Lisa recited the incantation, her voice trembling. The house shook violently, and the glass of the mirror glowed red-hot, her reflection's features twisted and distorted, its screams growing louder until, with a deafening crack, the mirror went dark. For a moment, everything was silent. Lisa stared at the mirror, now dull and lifeless. Her reflection was back to normal, moving as it should. She let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. She covered the mirror and shoved it into the attic, vowing never to look at it again. But the story doesn't end there. Weeks later, Lisa noticed something strange. When she walked past windows or glanced at her phone screen, her reflection seemed different. Its movements were just a fraction of a second behind hers, and sometimes, out of the corner of her eye, she swore she saw it watching her with that same wicked grin. Lisa realized too late that while she had bound the entity back to the mirror, it had left a piece of itself behind. Now she could never escape it. The reflection was always there, waiting for its chance to fight back again. When your reflection becomes your enemy, it knows everything about you, your habits, your fears, and your weaknesses. How can you outsmart something that shares your face and thoughts? Lisa's battle is not just physical, but psychological. Her reflection appears everywhere, in windows, phone screens, and even water, making her feel watched and vulnerable at every turn. The entity seems to feed on her fear, growing stronger the more she succumbs to it. Fighting back against such an enemy requires more than brute force. Lisa must dig deep into her willpower and unravel the mystery of the mirror's origin. What does it want? Why her? And most importantly, how can she turn its power against it? The chilling reality is that the reflection isn't just a separate entity. It might be a dark version of herself, forcing her to confront her inner demons in the most horrifying way possible. This battle between Lisa and her reflection becomes a fight for her soul, raising the ultimate question: can you defeat an enemy that is, in some way, a part of you? Lisa's story is a chilling reminder of the power of things we don't understand. Mirrors are more than just reflective surfaces. They're gateways, and sometimes what lies on the other side is better left undisturbed. So next time you pass by a mirror, pay attention. If something doesn't feel quite right, don't look too closely. You might not like what you see staring back.